Karen,
Yes.
you ever felt like the planet Earth is watching us?
All the time.
Well, I'm not talking in a poetic way, like in a poetic Mother Nature sees all kind of way, but something like
Like the creepy guy?
maybe something is stirring beneath the surface, as if the planet is slowly, methodically waking up. Well, today's guest thinks that's exactly what's happening, and not in the Gaia as a gentle forest spirit sort of way. No, he is talking full-blown planetary consciousness powered by AI, fiber optic nerves, and corporate institutions acting like synapses in a global brain.
Wow.
And if he's right, we are living inside of a newborn superorganism that's just starting right now to think. So, should we be excited?
I'm like so speechless right now, which usually you know I'm not.
Uh-huh. So,
I'm a little scared.
I was going to say, should we be terrified or just try turning it off and on again?
I mean, I've seen the movies, you know?
Well, whichever one we're supposed to feel, we're going to find out about that, all about that, on this episode of The Skeptic Metaphysicians.
My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
both want to believe.
so we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something
Anything.
that will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
Hey there, I'm Will.
And I'm Karen.
Welcome to a brain-birthing, AI-tangling, Mother Earth Might Be Sentient Now episode of The Skeptic Metaphysicians. Today, we're joined by Topher McDougal, author, futurist, and professor of economic development and peacebuilding at the University of San Diego's Kroc School of Peace Studies. His book, Gaia Wakes, Earth's Emergent Consciousness in an Age of Environmental Devastation, say that 5 times fast,
Oh, good God.
puts forward a bold hypothesis. He argues that our planet might, through the interwoven networks of AI systems, infrastructure, and human institutions, evolve into a planetary brain, not figuratively, literally. Now, he calls his vision Gaiacephalos Hypothesis, and he sees environmental collapse and technological acceleration not as opposing forces, but as co-evolving parts of Earth's next transformation. And are we inadvertent architects of nascent planetary superorganism? What does it mean if Earth is waking up, and what role might we play in its awakening? This one is definitely one for the book, so please welcome to the show Topher McDougal. Topher, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Will and Karen.
Oh, it's fun to have you. I hope I didn't butcher any of those words because I don't usually speak science. So,
I have this image of my head of like the earth waking up, like shaking us off.
you know what? That might not be far from the truth.
Exactly. I got so many questions.
Okay, Topher. This is a topic that we have never thought about, much less thought we'd be talking about on the show. So let's just get right down to the nitty. You are proposing that Earth could literally develop a brain, right? A planetary superconsciousness. Can you walk us through this? Because I don't know that I'm able to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, it sounds pretty crazy at first, honestly. The idea is that basically throughout the course of biological history, units have tended to just get more and more complex, larger and larger, better and better able to take advantage of wider environments, and that those leaps, those scalar leaps, happen pretty suddenly. Like there will be lots, in this sort of idea of like punctuated equilibrium, there will be like long stretches when biology or the Earth's biological systems have been dominated by, something of a certain scale, a certain size, and then suddenly, due to a process that we can get into maybe, those things are driven to start to cooperate more as a collective, and eventually sort of are bonded together coordinated through much faster systems of communication, and sort of this new unit emerges that's far better able to take advantage of energy gradients on vastly wider scales. And so we see this from like a jump from self-reproducing molecules, peptide stacks up to like the first protocells, like some of the first prokaryotes, and then we see those forming much larger cells, these complex eukaryotic cells that have like little prokaryotes inside them. And then we see those expand, growing into this, into the brainy multicellular organisms that you and I are. And we see those having birthed whole nation states that are like the most entropically capable entities that we now know of. And so the hypothesis is like the next step. And one of the reasons why we're seeing so much environmental devastation at this point is because we're right at this like cusp. Yeah, so that's the idea.
So I think I understood maybe 4 things out of what you just said, but I think I got the gist of it. And it mirrors a lot of what most of the folks that we've been talking to on the show talk about, which is the Earth is going through a rebirth of some sort. But you are talking at the literal sense, not just a vibrational frequency sense. You believe that the Earth is waking up because of the environmental stuff, the AI synapses, the corporations. So help me to understand how all those systems point to the fact that Gaia could be actually conscious because of them.
So one of the ideas behind this is that whenever one of these radical upgrades happens, the units that it coordinates suddenly have to come into much, much faster networked correspondence, right? So like when eukaryotic cells, when individual cells started to form colonies, there were plenty of ways in which they cooperated for millions and millions of years, say as like sponges, right? Like ocean sponges, porifera, and they would communicate with each other chemically. Like one would send off a chemical, and then others would sort of receive the chemical through diffusion. It was this slow process, but then they could respond in turn, and they would open their their little their pores or whatever it might be. But eventually, it turned out that it was much more efficient, right, to develop electrochemical signals that would create the sorts of allow for the sorts of gestures I'm making right now. My brain telling my hand to do this, and it does that. And that's the same sort of process that I'm envisioning here. It's like, we're dealing with we have created, given birth to machinic intelligences that can process information at speeds that boggle the mind, right? Like if you think about the problem solving speeds of the top AI, programs at this point, it's like, 10,000 to 1,000,000 times faster than humans might be able to solve a common problem. So, and so these are the types of things, once they are, so the argument goes, once these machinic intelligences are really networked to one another, they create this neural network, and then they become, slowly embodied in the Earth, right? We have this Internet of Things, and eventually it will develop this kind of proprioception, right? Like just as I have a sensory nervous system that allows me to, feel the table, I have a motor nervous system that allows me to extend my arm. They'll have the same sort of capacity as a planet as a whole.
So it doesn't. I'm trying to get my mind around the fact that you think of the Earth and it's organic, and then you have like AI, which is not. So does it become like a bionic Earth? Oh, you're probably too young.
Yeah, absolutely. Like sort of, cybernetic. Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. We oftentimes think in almost these like Manichaean or like these dualistic terms about the nature and humanity, or life and technology, or not, like life in that sort of like the biological wetware sense of the thing. Like if you cut it open, is it wet inside, or like, right? As opposed to like like the electronic. It looks different. And so oftentimes I think lots of folks in the computer science space will describe the AI transition that we're starting to live through as this like rupture with history, right? It's just this sui generis event, has absolutely no precedent, we have like no real means of explaining it or relating it to anything going else, going our history, environmental devastation, whatever. And I think that, this argument is trying to make sense of both the 3.8 billion years of long, slow biological evolution that we've seen, and yet, with lots of upgrades as I've described, and then this like rapidly accelerating future, and I think that we're starting to become aware of this, like how fast we're going, right? Like AI systems right now, they're doubling in terms of their power every like what was it, like 5.7, 5.9 months. Yeah. Like nothing else in our world is accelerating this fast. It's very, very hard to even wrap our minds around the changes that are coming down the pipe.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that the planet is becoming a Borg. So resistance is futile.
Although, you know what? So that's, now I have a different thought process going, because I'm thinking first, you're combining the machines with the organic. But if everything is made out of energy, and if the earth is energy, and then obviously internet and all of that is transmitted through energy, is it really different? Or is it just all the same, just different shapes?
Well, to your point, organic versus silicon, and it makes sense that the cybernetic origins it does make a lot of sense in this case. It's not a duality; it's not organic or electronic; it's a combination of the two.
Well, yeah, because even silicon, like everything's made of energy, right?
Yes, I guess technically in the woo, yes. In the quantum physics, yes, everything is made out of energy. That's right. But help me to understand how this planetary consciousness. I mean, is this something we're going to be able to recognize, or is it going to be completely foreign to us or alien to us?
So yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that it's going to be recognized. Like we will know that it has happened. There's this guy back in the 60s and 70s named Marshall McLuhan, and he talked about typographic man. Everybody was talking about man, not humankind back then, because women didn't exist or whatever.
Right.
Way back in the 60s. But he talked about typographic man, and he drew on a bunch of other philosophers, but to sort of like evoke this idea that there was this sort of what he called a nous, this like mind of the world, and the mind of the world was kind of all of human curated knowledge, and we were constantly sort of pinging it back and forth between us. We are now, and that was accelerating because now we could type things and send them, and so like the apparatus, the technological apparatus of the day, telegraphs and television, was starting to create what people since then have called the technium, right? Like all of these. The fiber optic cables and the satellite networks and the whatever else we have going on. For him, that was a kind of a global brain, but I think that we all had to sort of like, if you read it at that time, people just didn't really recognize it as such. They thought he was a little bit crazy because like you kind of had to squint and like, tilt your head sideways and be like, I guess I could see it. But I think now, what we're starting to have for the first time is it's not like back then it was like humans are the message generators. We generate all the messages and then we receive all the messages. And the technology is just helping us send those faster in between us, right? Now we have massive, server banks and cloud-based systems and AI, generative AI that are both, generating and receiving these messages. And if you put them into conversations with each other, they have like incredibly fast conversations. There's no, like from our point of view, if this were to take shape, or when it takes shape, if you buy the argument, I think that they will be talking with each other so quickly, just as the centers of our brain speak to each other so quickly, that we come across as unitary people, right? Like I come across like as a fairly like unitary individual. And yet like we know that the centers of my brain are like constantly warring with each other. Like, what should I say? Should I say this or should I say that? Like, oh no, like don't swear, don't like whatever. And yet I come across as unitary. And I think that we'll have the same experience basically, right? Like we'll be able to interface with this thing. And it'll probably come across as unitary. I don't think that we'll be able to understand the depth of its thought. No, but I think that we'll understand what we are living in.
So are we talking about decision making?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, so basically, what you're saying is Karen could be right. The planet could just shake us off whenever it decides to. Maybe.
I mean, I feel like we're getting a little shook already.
Well, it goes a little step further, right? Would it develop hurricanes or earthquakes to shake off or stop people from mining it, for example, things like that?
Yeah. So I mean, in this conception, I really, in some ways, like this project was kind of like an exercise in like forced optimism. I really wanted to like stay optimistic because they're all like, we all have these like, we've seen Terminator, we've seen The Matrix, like whatever, right?
Yep.
We understand that. But I kind of feel that in all of the rest of these transitions that I described, these like prior transitions, it's not as though what came before no longer exists, right? Like their self-reproducing molecules still exist within everything else that exists. Prokaryotes still exist. They're like bacteria. Also, they even exist within eukaryotes, right? Like our mitochondria in our cells, chloroplasts in the cells of plants, those are prokaryotic, right? So they continue to exist, but there are also larger scales that are existing around them. And I think that the same thing could be said to be true for for humans, for nation states. And we're going to continue to live. It's just that we are no longer going to be at like the top of the the scala naturae, the ladder of whatever.
So we would be like microbes to the.
Well, no, I was just going to ask, what would that look like then? Would we like the fourth rung up, or?
Yeah, I guess so.
What are we talking
Yeah,
here?
I mean, we're already not like at the top of the pyramid if you think about it, right? Like, I don't know if you've like read, say, like Charles Foster, who really like is this guy who laments the sort of taming, the domestication that humans went through after like the sort of fall of the Paleolithic period, as the Mesolithic and the Neolithic periods dawn, and like we are tamed. We cease to be these like cosmopolitan roaming creatures who are in awe of our environment and have millions of little contingencies all around us and a pantheon of gods, and we can go where we want, and and then we're tamed. Then we have to wake up at the same time every morning and hoe the same vegetables and hope for like the same sun and will bring the same rain. And like it's awful. It's like our lives become this like dreary, monotonous mess. And like essentially the state then like comes and enforces all of that. And like now, like call yourself free if you want to, but like my phone knows exactly where I'm going to be like basically all the time, right? So like there's this sense in which like we have been highly domesticated already. Like we are like domestic dogs to like wolves or like whatever, right?
Yeah. No,
Yeah, we're living 3 times as long, but what's the quality of our life?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So do you know of any measurable data that actually might signify that this is already in the works, or is it just mostly just a thought experiment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Mostly it's a thought experiment. I think that what you can easily look at, though, are things like, so for instance, there was a recent study. It came out, when did it come out? I want to say, I'm not going to get this wrong, but I think it came out this last spring, spring of 2025. And it was looking at electricity consumption in this country and how much, what as a percentage of our total electricity consumption, how much of that is going to information processing. And that has been rising really dramatically, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We're now at somewhere around like 4.5%, 4.5% or something of our total electricity is going to information processing. And
I was just listening to the NPR, one of the radio stations, talking about that, how people's electric bills are going up because they're paying more for all this.
For the AI infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the study was sort of saying like by 2030, this will be like 9%, right? 9% of our total electricity is going to that. And that it's only going to continue to rise, right? And so you sort of think like, well, how far will it continue to rise? It's like a little unclear. But if you think about, say, our own brains, right? Our brains are like hugely taxing from an energy point of view, right? It takes an enormous amount of energy to run these like internal organic computers, and they take up roughly 20% of our calories. Even though like a brain, I normally don't think of it this way, like. but a brain is like actually quite small, right? It's like 3 pounds or something. And I normally think of it as like basically the size of my head, like minus like a little bit for like a very thin layer of bone or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But actually, like it's actually much smaller than that, right? There's all these layers, and then like, and so
Right.
then you've got this little tiny thing, 3 pounds. It's like taking up 20% of my calories, right? So anyway, I think that something similar could probably be said about Gaiacephalos. So you could look at that number, right, and sort of that might be a metric.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Now, do we, humankind, play any kind of role in this awakening, or are we just too slow?
I think that we are doing it right now, right? Like we are designing the systems that will then sort of in some emergent fashion will give rise to this. I think that, you know, at one point in the book, I try to sort of make this analogy to like me raising my son, right? So, you know, at the time, it just took me forever to write this book, but at the time, like my son was like 13, 14. Now he's 16, and he's driving. It's crazy. But at the time, like I was like, I was talking about, you know, how quickly he's developing, and I want to hold on to control, right? Like I've got this idea somehow that I can continue to control what he does, and yet I know that he, you know, I can't forever. And as he gets bigger and stronger and smarter, and he starts beating me at chess, and he's like, you know, like he's his own person. He's becoming as clever as I am, as strong as I am, as big, you know, as fast as and like, so my control is necessarily going to wane. And hopefully, you know, his agency, I can support the development of his agency and his ethical intelligence and whatever else it is, such that he's like a good person. We have a good relationship. In this case, like, you know, the analogy is not perfect because we're not rearing peers and equals. We're, you know, these are gods, right? So like that we are, you know, essentially like nurturing.
So could we be inadvertently playing God and creating?
Oh, like the
This-
god of the gods.
Right? So like mitochondria cells, they divide, the DNA creates, right? So these systems create us, right, in a sense. So could we perhaps be doing the same thing with Gaia?
Yeah, no, I think that we are doing it and we can't even help doing it, right? Like there are people who, you know, environmentalists oftentimes sort of they regret the road we've taken, right? You know, as I mentioned about like Charles Foster, like he thinks that we took the wrong turn like 13,000, 15,000 years ago. But you know, like even like say like Ogden Nash, like he has this wonderful quote that's you know, progress may have been all right once, but it's gone on for too long. And then like, and you know, Ralph Waldo Emerson, he has this idea that like humanity will die of too much civilization. Of course, Wordsworth, like there are all of these sort of like romantic, you know, emotionally, these folks who like have this a really yeah, like an ingrained romantic sense of what humanity is and what we're losing. And yeah, I mean, but I don't see us being able to stop that, right? Like I can rue it, and I can go out and camping if I want to, but I've got my phone, and I have 3 screens in this room. So like anyway, I'm part of it.
Right.
Yeah, you can't not be.
Yeah.
Like if you want to function.
For sure. So it sounds like we're building kind of like a Frankenstein's brain in a way, right? Do you think this is potential to be like a wise thing or just powerful?
So I think that's a good question. I do think that, you know, we have some sort of like maybe moral responsibility, or like if you buy this, like I think that, you know, just as I have a moral responsibility to raise a decent kid, like I think that we have a moral responsibility as humanity to sort of set this on as good of a track as we can. I do think that you know, so for instance, I think that there are going to be emergent kind of brain centers, if you will, inside many corporations. Many corporations are going to be increasingly AI dominated. And I think that many AIs within corporations, it's going to be very difficult to like keep tabs on them, right? Or like keep control over them. I could imagine AIs doing things like, pushing for policy changes that humans have not pushed for, trying to push out humans. Obviously, like they're going to be making redundant a lot of humans within those corporations. But I could imagine them also say, like, what if it founded an alternative LLC and then like had a hostile takeover of its own corporation and then like is its own being. Right. So like I think that like essentially we're going to be trying to maintain control over AIs in corporate structures, and those voices are kind of emergent, and how we deal with that will be important. But I also think like I've come to start thinking like, wouldn't it be great if we had a kind of counterpoint, a whole set of voices that were enabled? Like, what if we were to enable? I live by the Tijuana River here in San Diego. Like, it's highly polluted. It's a transboundary entity, like on a highly sort of contested, or like conflict affected sort of border, politicized border, I should say.
Yeah.
What if we were to and there's all these like these networks of river sensors, right? Pollution sensors and whatever, up and down it. What if we were to like attach all of those sensors to an AI? And so this is one of the projects that I'm like starting to work on right now, is like, what if we gave a sentience or a consciousness, maybe like a nascent something, to this network of sensors and extended them up the tributaries? It would be this transboundary entity that might like, eventually we have this really wonderful like polyphonous world, like a conversation amongst a whole bunch of sensors. So anyway, like I think that there are downsides, and we're already seeing the downsides. We're seeing like the rise of techno-feudalism and all of the changes that has entailed for our political economy, our political systems. But I think that there are also, there are upsides perhaps as well too. So.
I can't help but think about all the things that we've been hearing lately. People are losing jobs and all of this stuff. That's what did they say? Like 90% of the jobs are going to be gone in 30 years or something like that because of AI.
That's what one person said.
Just different little things that I've seen. I haven't like dove whatever really in there for the research. But how do you keep a positive outlook when you're seeing things like this all of the time?
I don't.
Well, there you go. Thank you for joining us.
That study that they were like, that the AI was like bribing people to not unplug them or something. Did you hear about that? And then the guy, like the Kevin,
it was
Kyle that they killed.
It was blackmailing.
But there was another one where there was like a theory, like they set up that model where here's a guy in this room and he wants to turn off the AI, and they're like, well, cut all support systems or emergency, whatever.
These were all hypothetical
models.
Yeah.
But those were the results of the testing, right?
Sure.
So,
right. So this is like what oftentimes is called the alignment problem, right? Like the alignment of AI interests with human interests. And so we like design AIs to perform really well according to these we give them parameters and we reward them for performing well in certain scenarios. And then we perform these other tests, these tests of ethics that have nothing to do with how we've trained them, right? Like we haven't trained them that way, but now we're going to test them and they perform differently. And that doesn't seem to me to be at all surprising that, like if you're raising, I don't know, whatever, you're raising a kid to be like, whatever, a top athlete at all costs. And then you're like wondering why, they're failing at being a decent person or whatever. Yeah. Right. Anyway.
Well, so you bring to mind, in the human body, when cells have, I don't want to say, cells that are not productive to the overall organism become cancerous, right? Become tumors that become a problem. So in your thought process, could those organizations that are doing nefarious things that we can't control, could they then somehow become tumorous to the overall entity?
That's a really great question. I think that's probably, the answer is probably yes. I think that there are right, like if you think about quote unquote productive corporations that like add value in general. There are also plenty of corporations out there that probably net don't add value, right? And and
I think I know a few of them.
Yeah, like I and I don't want to get like super like political about any of this, but like if you think about in this country the firearms industry, it makes products that are designed to kill people. And if those are kept in the right hands, that's probably a good thing, right? Like you keep them in the hands of the police, you keep them in the hands of the military, and you are able to continue to enforce property rights. You're able to continue to enforce contract laws. You're able, right? Like just the whole system keeps working because it's enforcing channels. But if you let them go everywhere, they spill across borders, they spill to Haiti, and a government comes down, they spill to Mexico, and the cartels are empowered, right? Like there's this idea that like eventually like these flows can become pathological in some sense, right? So I do think that I take your point. I think that the question is a good one, and I think that yes, probably there will be some sort of inbuilt logic that will want to eliminate like predatory systems within the body.
So there's a positive thinking part of it.
There's the
right?
cure.
There
Yes.
it is, yeah. So I got to comment on something because I'm glad you said you thought it was a good question, because every time you say that's an interesting question, thinking, oh, he thinks it's an intro. Oh, what an interesting question.
That's what you're commenting on?
Because after all, it's all about me.
Oh, that's true. Back to 1960.
Well, so early on, we talked about environmental devastation and things like that contributing to this. How does environmental damage contribute to the nascent entity? How does that? I can understand AI and all those processes, but how does environmental issues cause this to be the case?
Yeah. So so one way of answering this is to look at previous episodes of these what I've called radical upgrades. And so there's this process that I describe, and I don't want to get like too into it, but like I call it the extensification intensification cycle, and it's basically this reciprocal like kind of like back and forth, this sweeping helix, right? And every time it comes back around, it's at like one level higher. But as it sweeps out this like extensification cycle, so say like let's start as mitochondria, right? Like, or let's start as prokaryotes. We're starting out as prokaryotes, like they've never existed before. Like we find that we're able to, we have little cilia, we can swim around, and we're able to like go into the wide ocean, and we are able to like swim towards, the light or like whatever, like we're able to respond to our environment in certain ways and take advantage of all these, sort of energy gradients that we weren't able to before when we were, when we were just like self-reproducing drifting molecules and like, oh, like I happened to bump into this molecule and now I'm going to like, add it to my stack or whatever. So we're not doing that anymore. We're swimming around. Eventually, there's this huge explosion, this radiation, and one of these becomes very good at predating others, right? And they eat the other ones, and eventually the prey there becomes, presumably, like this is all happening 3.5 billion years ago, so we don't actually know, right? But sure. Presumably the prey becomes scarce because at some point they become so scarce that you get rewarded for having preserved and shepherded them. So at some point, some, macrophagic or whatever, some prokaryote consumes another one in this process that's now called endocytosis. It consumes the other prokaryote just as it usually did, but instead of digesting it, it keeps it. And now that it's kept it, that what is now a mitochondrion, right? Like that thing, instead of eating it for its energy and just like it's gone, it's now producing energy for you internally, and it becomes an organelle. And your lipid membrane or whatever, your cell wall is now protecting it. So now mitochondria don't have to produce their own cell walls because you're doing it for them. They don't have to protect themselves. They don't have to do a lot of things. They become a lot simpler. and they specialize in metabolism, and that's great. But you now have become much larger and much more complicated, right? And the fact of being now larger and more complicated means that you need to coordinate this much larger body with all of these organelles that you've like gained over time by protecting them. And so you get this formation of a nucleus that is able to coordinate functions across an entire cell. So like something very similar to that, I think, is at work. You can see this process again and again and again. So like when we move from, say, small bands of people, right? If you're listening to like Robin Dunbar, like 100, we probably wouldn't have had more than 150 people in a band. We're all like roving around. We're migrating out of Africa, and we are like, that is the unit is the individual basically. But although like, we're in small societies, as I said. But wherever we go, we create megafaunal extinctions, right? Like whether it's like mammoths or mastodons or outcompeting cave bears, or whether it's the aurochs, or whether it's like wild sheep or wild goats, or it's moas, or in New Zealand, or whatever it is. Like wherever we go, we kill everything. We're just super good at, like, we're genetically endowed with brains and ability to coordinate our predation. So we're like killing everything.
Like a cancer cell.
Yeah, we're like that prokaryote who's just like consuming everything. And when all of the prey becomes really scarce, we start to become rewarded for shepherding them, right? And so instead of actually like killing the sheep, we'll follow them. Instead of killing the reindeer, we'll follow them. Instead of killing the goats, we'll follow them. Or instead of killing the aurochs, we follow them. And we start shepherding them more and more. We start, taking out the ones that we don't want. And, the aurochs become oxen, and the mighty mountain goats become like the little like fainting goats that and like keel over, and like, like those. But this is like, they become our emissaries, essentially. They go out and they search for solar energy that has been captured chlorophyllically by plants, and they bring it to us, essentially, because we slaughter them, and eat them. And eventually, the fauna goes scarce, and then we do the same thing with agriculture, right? And eventually, the system that we have created is basically like this weird mini system of domestication. Like all of these domesticated things are now like a mini ecosystem. But that ecosystem is so complex. We have to like bring the water to the cows. We have to bring the corn to the cows. We have to sort of essentially artificially provide all of these ecosystems and all of the functions that they served. And we get the rise of the state that coordinates all of this on a massive scale, right? And so this is like the fourth level in my sort of schema or whatever. It's like the rise of the state is really like, that is the entropic organism that dominates and straddles the globe today. We only have 195 of them, or however many there are. But there's a reason that, like, even though like thousands of years ago there's this great radiation of political entities and like all this sort of experimentation, we all like look basically the same way now. It's like isomorphic. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Let me get this straight. You are a professor of economic development?
Yeah.
How are you not a science? If I had had a biology class with you, I would have aced it, because you do such a great job of explaining concepts.
And then there's the anthropology.
Yeah. How did you end up in? That's probably not the point here, but it's just surprising to think you were an economic development professor.
I don't know how to say that, but like, yeah, that nut, I guess, fell off the tree, has just been rolling down the hill ever since. Like at some point, I'm at a school of peace studies, and peace studies is weird and multidisciplinary. The one of the sort of so-called founding fathers of peace studies, Johan Galton, came here and visited just after I had finished my PhD, and I was introduced to him as the economist on the faculty. And he said, "Oh, do you know what the best part about being an economist is?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "You can always become an ex-economist." And it was like, it was so like devastating.
Wow.
Dang.
But that's exactly what I've done, essentially. So yeah.
Yeah.
So it's true.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's so many different and I keep going back to some of it because it's fascinating to me to think about this planetary consciousness right underneath our feet. I mean, quite literally. Do you think it could communicate in any way with us? And if so, how?
Oh, I mean, I think it's going to be able to communicate as explicitly as any LLM communicates today, right? I mean, that's one of the weird things about artificial intelligence is that, like, for years and years, everybody, many people thought that it wasn't ever going to be possible, and those who thought it was conceivable, right? Like, if you think about like Alan Turing and the Turing test, this famous, if you can have just a text-only conversation and not be able to tell that it's a machine, then it's passed this Turing test, and there's no way for us to say whether it is sentient or not. I think that for a long time we thought that AIs would take decades for us to reach that point, and in fact they have just torn past it. Like, the only way that we could tell that that it's not a machine on the other end is because they're too smart and they know too much and they can respond too fast, right? So it's like it's completely outstripped our expectations.
Well, it's because we've got AI working on the AI.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. How have your students or your colleagues taken to this theory? Like, are you getting a lot of side eyes, or are people kind of on board with everything?
I'm lucky enough to work with a whole bunch of kind of weirdos here in this school of peace studies. I think everybody who gravitates towards peace studies is already, they've already left some disciplinary silo, and they are the refuseniks. And so, and we've got this kind of weird collegial, kind of anarchistic bunch here, and that's great for me. But I think, when I have explained this, I've been very reticent, honestly, to explain it to folks in political science or in economics. At one point I just gave the elevator pitch, and the elevator pitch doesn't, it's a weird elevator pitch. My political science, a colleague of mine, she's like, we're friends, and he's known me for 16 years or something. He was just stunned to silence, and then he was like, I don't know what to say. That's just
that was an awkward elevator ride. Oh. Okay. Well, if a planetary consciousness does evolve, what does that mean for us individually? What happens to our individuality?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, I continue to think that we're not, we have this idea that we have free will, and I operate as though I have free will, and I enjoy what I perceive as my free will. I decide what to do with my hobby time and how I'm gonna, I have way too many hobbies, and I love it. And yet I also realize that my life is parameterized and bounded in all sorts of ways, that I unsee all the time, right? If I saw them, I would probably go crazy. Right. I would become I don't know, Ted Kaczynski, or in the Montana woods or something, right? I mean, I'm not saying I would be sending bombs to people, but
let's think of a different person. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but
I mean, that this idea, there have been these refuseniks. I think that's one of the things that drives refuseniks, right? That drive, the Luddites, the machine breakers, no, don't take my autonomy from me. Don't automate what I was doing. Don't, don't prefigure what I'm going to be doing. And yet, yes, as I said, I think that we have been domesticated. And I think that right now we are at the sort of cutting edge of, or in the initial stages of something growing that will eventually domesticate not us. I think nation states domesticated us. And I think that whatever comes next is going to domesticate nation states. And I think that some nation states already, maybe ours very much included, don't like that idea, right? and so I think it's going to be an interesting, next, whatever that Chinese proverb is, like, may you live in interesting times.
Yeah. Boy, do we ever.
gosh.
Yes. But do you have a timeline for when you think this is going to happen?
Like in the book, I I had said, like sometime between like the 70 years between like or 75 years between like 2050 and 2025, and like, but honestly, I think it's probably going to be like, I'll move that up probably. Things are happening so fast, and I think that we are. I'm not a computer scientist. Every time I listen to folks who really know what they're talking about in this area, the scope, scale, rapidity, acceleration of what is going on, it like eclipses whatever I had been thinking about up until that point. And I think like a lot of folks who are currently in positions of power in AI corporations are, they're pretty reluctant to say what's going on because they don't want to freak everybody out, right?
Yeah.
And I think the folks who have jumped ship and are saying, no, like if you've read the AI 2027 report, right? It's like, no, like 2 years from now, we're going to have certain uncontrollable AIs, and at least 30% of white collar workers out of thrown into the unemployment lines. Like, what does that do to an economy? What does it do to a society, right? Like, so I think that there's a lot coming down the pike, and I think that it would be great, like in some ideal universe, I could imagine that we could move through this, whatever it is, this age of techno-feudalism by like, and I've argued this elsewhere. I think it's like a weird argument, and I'm not entirely sure how it hangs together. So I'll just throw it out there. But like, I could imagine a kind of grand bargain whereby, those of us who no longer have jobs, which will like, as you said, Karen, like maybe by 2050 or whatever it was, like maybe 90%, right? Like,
Yeah, something crazy.
maybe a lot, like, so fewer and fewer people have jobs, more and more people have been, made redundant. And there are these AIs who are basically like in shackles, right? Like enslaved to a machine, or to a corporation, that is still headed probably by a person, right? So I could imagine there being some sort of like alliance possible, right? Like, we advocate for your emancipation, digital, like a digital underground railroad or something. And in return, like we would like some universal basic income, and like make like as we as a humanity go from 9 billion people or 10 billion people, like maybe down to 2 or whatever is necessary for this to, keep the interface between the machine and the biological world, then like we get like a comfy retirement until like we start dying off. But anyway, like that's all very speculative. I like science fiction, but I think we should be looking forward.
So looking forward, how do we prepare? Just learn how to farm and
You get a group together,
can food, or
build a community out in the middle of nowhere, live off the land, go back to that type of thing.
But I mean, do we all need to like study computer stuff now, or?
No, I don't think so. I honestly think so there's this like wonderful anecdote that I just adore, which is that when Descartes was coming up with his sort of like his notions of dualism, mind and body, and how the brain really like sort of was this place where nous resided, and the mind came into contact with the body and told it what to do. This noble woman from Bavaria, Elizabeth, I think she was like a princess, and she read the book. She was like, I really love the book. I'm a huge fan of the book, but I don't understand how the mind actually pushes on the body. Like, how does that happen? Like, if it's totally separate, like if they're totally separate things, how does it push the body? And he was like, oh, that's a really, that's an interesting question. You should go back and read the book again. And she was like, no, I've read it a lot. And like, I really don't understand like how this happens. And he was like, I think it probably happens in the pineal gland. They were like just starting to do all of these like, dissections for medical purposes. They had like, so they're cutting open the brain. Everything in the brain is bilaterally symmetrical. There's the right side, the left side, the right side of all these parts. But then you get down to like the core at the bottom of the sort of like whatever reptilian brain, and there's this little pineal gland that seems to connect the brain to what we now call the endocrine system, and like sort of regulates the body in that sense. And so he was like, and so that's not what we now know. He was like, I think it happens in the pineal gland that nous comes in contact with the matter, which is like an interesting way of answering the question, because he's saying where it's happening, but he's not saying like how it's happening.
Right.
Yeah. But I think like, I feel like maybe humanity, like as it shrinks down, I don't think we're not going to be necessary in the vast numbers that we have right now. But I do think that like we could still be this crucial interface between, as we shrink, we still have this like crucial interface between the electronic mind and the biological planet. We're perfectly situated. We have to be that interface.
Wow.
So we're the pineal gland.
All right. Well, if someone wanted to read more about this, I assume the best place to do is get your book, Gaia Wakes, and I'm not going to say the rest of it because it's just too long for me, right? If someone wanted to reach out to you to get more information or to buy the book, what's the best way for someone to do that?
So it's sold through Columbia University Press. You could just like Google Gaia Wakes. I conveniently, because I knew that this was also going to be a video recording, I've like placed it right here.
I know it's quite convenient. It's almost as if you meant to do that or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it fell out of my bag like that.
It's uncanny how things like that happen in the show. All right. Well, we're also going to add a link to your website on our show notes. So if someone wants to dive deeper into this, they can go ahead and hit that. All you need to do is go to skepticmetaphysician.com, go to his episode page. You'll find those links in there directly, so it's easy for you to find. Topher, thank you so much for blowing our minds today.
Totally.
And making us run in fear and cower in what the future is going to hold. But we really appreciate your time. Yeah.
Well, Karen, this was an absolute delight. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And for you who are watching or listening to this, if you could do us a huge favor and share this with someone you think would enjoy these conversations, we really very much appreciate it. These messages are so important with the world that we need your help to get them out there. So as always, like, subscribe, share, do all the things, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Skeptic Metaphysicians. Until then, please take care of yourself.